I'm coming up on the first portage now. It's a nice, easy one. We are now on North Hegman Lake, and North Hegman is a popular destination for day trippers, primarily because there is a vivid display of Anishinaabe pictographs that are located near the northern top of North Hegman. But to be honest, even if there were no pictographs here, North Hegman is a beautiful lake. This place just looks prehistoric, and that's fitting because those rocks are probably more than 1 billion years old, and it is the Anishinaabe who painted the pictographs which we are coming upon right now. And these pictographs tell a lot of different stories. This particular set of pictographs is interesting because what it shows us is an image of Nanabazu, who is pronounced in many different ways. Longfellow referred to him as Hiawatha, but Nanabazu is an Anishinaabe kind of savior figure, an important figure in their cosmology. Nanabazu operates as a kind of mediator between various worlds and various species, etc., and taught humans a lot of the most important things that we know, things like fire and hunting, etc. Many things of which he learned from the animals, or he learned from other, what Anishinaabe call manitous, or like gods or demigods. And you come to these places and they're just, they have an incredible feeling. Truly remarkable. Definitely worth a day trip. So now we are coming upon what is the most difficult portage that I'll have for this entire trip, and I have to do it twice, both in and out. It is a long portage, more than 400 rod, and then in addition, it is also notorious for a section that is a lot of mud. And I've done it before, but I did it in a dry year. This is a wet year, so I could be in for quite a ride here. Now the work begins. Well, I am pleasantly surprised. That portage, which is over 400 rod, wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The mud hole was there, but it was shorter than I remember, and it wasn't much muddier than the last time I was there. So it was not a bad portage, and I think it really helps that I'm able to do it in one carry now. There's only one confusing spot on the portage, and that is you come to an intersection of 4 or 5 trails that come in. And if you're coming from North Hegman, what you're doing is you're looking to turn right. There are 2 options to turn right, and you want to turn right where there is the largest rock. So the largest rock will be on your left, and that's the path that you go down in order to get here to Angleworm Lake. And if you make it here to Angleworm Lake, you are certainly in for a beautiful experience. This is a gorgeous, gorgeous lake. It's very hard to get to. There are huge portages from all directions, and so it is seldom traveled. You are likely to be here on your own. And then on top of that, Angleworm Lake also has a trail that circumnavigates it, that goes all the way around and gets up really high so that you can look down onto the lake. So it is a wonderful, wonderful lake. It would seem that we are reaching the end of Angleworm Lake. There's a large beaver dam here. Home Lake is pretty nice. It's a nice lake, I'm surprised. It's really beautiful, lots of old growth, or at least very mature pine trees, red and white. Some nice birch and aspen to break it up. This is a great lake. I can see why people call it Home Lake. It's a nice lake. Very tempting to stay here, actually. But alas, I will continue on. I want to try to get as close to Crooked Lake as I can and hopefully get out there and enjoy some morning paddling before the afternoon comes and the wind picks up. That seems to be the way. June is one of the windiest months in the summer. Windiest, stormiest, most precipitation, and this June certainly has lived up to that. It's been very cold. It even froze on the 10th. But it is warming up now, and with the warmth and the humidity comes lots of turbulent weather. Even now, even today, lots of little localized rain showers coming in, but my Zolio says nothing organized is going to happen today, so I'm risking it and I'm pushing forward. All right, this is the portage over to Gull Lake, another long portage, probably 270 some odd rods, so about a mile. A little less than a mile, and I have to make sure that I don't accidentally end up on the Angleworm Trail. Second long portage of the day accomplished. I have one other long portage before I get to Crooked Lake, but I don't believe I'll be tackling that today. And this is, in fact, the first time that I have traveled onto Gull Lake, and I can see why it is so popular. This is gorgeous. So I'll probably think about camping soon. Well, the skies are starting to threaten pretty seriously now. What most of the day has seemed pretty unorganized and very scattered is starting to get a little bit more organized. And so I've decided to go ahead and take this very excellent campsite before it really hits, get a tarp up, and then set myself up for a comfortable evening. It's 3 o'clock now, so it's starting to get late anyway, but it's a nice campsite. Look at this view. That happened pretty fast. I didn't even fully get the tarp up, but I got it up enough that I've got a spot here that I'm out of the rain. My rain gear is attached to the boat, and I'm just gonna hang out here and tarp. This should be a pretty fast moving system. I can see blue skies on the western horizon, so this should go pretty fast. The route is pretty ambitious. I'm hoping to cover a lot of ground in 4 nights, a maximum of 5 nights. So that's the journey. It's going to be a big loop. It comes all the way around through these lakes, up here, and then back down there again. So that's Well, the weather certainly has calmed down and it has cleared up. Zoleo report says that this will continue through tonight and tomorrow as well. But now the sun is dipping below the horizon, and anywhere that there is shade back here, the mosquitoes are vicious. So rather than fight mosquitoes, I'm going to elect to go to bed early tonight, get up early tomorrow, and take advantage of what promises to be good weather. It's a great campsite. One review said this was the best campsite in the entire Boundary Waters. I would agree that it is certainly a 5-star campsite. It checks all of the boxes. Now I'm out. This is my second day. This is my first full day, and I'm headed to Crooked Lake. And from my Zoleo weather report, it looks as though there should be very little to no wind all day. I'm hoping that we can at least get up to 4 miles an hour for wind. That's kind of the perfect amount of breeze, because 4 miles an hour is enough to push away certainly the mosquitoes and most other bugs, but definitely the mosquitoes. I don't know if we're going to get to that point, but when it comes to mosquitoes versus windy big lakes, I'll take mosquitoes every time. It's a short paddle to the portage, to Gun Lake, and then from Gun Lake I am doing another big portage, about 370 rod, and then I think there's one more big portage today, about 140 rod, and then I'm done with big portages until the end of the trip when I come back this way. That was an ugly portage. It looks as though it starts with a beaver dam, and it is wet. First cloud of the day. Oftentimes, although it feels pretty dry today, oftentimes when it's humid and warm like today, the rocks will heat up and then they will create convective air currents that push up into the upper atmosphere, and they pull the humidity with them. And then that humidity condenses and forms little storm clouds that march across the landscape. I think that's what we were dealing with yesterday. Just small, isolated storms that are created in this really humid environment, especially when it's hot. So clouds will develop, I would guess, throughout the day, but it doesn't seem very humid today, which is good news. It's still pretty dry, and the breeze is just perfect. Not enough to really impede or really even help paddling, but just enough to cool things down. There's one campsite on this lake, so this chain of lakes, I think many of them, if not all of them, all have a campsite, which means that even though this is a well-traveled area, you could potentially have a lake all to yourself. Taking a break here in the shade, gonna drink some water, eat a snack, and I am coming up on the next portage. One thing I noticed about this area that's kind of interesting is that, at least so far, I haven't seen a whole lot of balsam fir. It's mostly spruce, jack pine, white pine, some red pine, aspen. And it is 10:40 now, and it's been warm this morning. It's starting to warm up even more, and now we're starting to see more clouds. And it's exactly as I predicted. It should continue to do this throughout the day, so that by around 3 or 4 o'clock, we should have, you know, partly sunny skies, and the sun will peek behind the clouds on occasion. And I believe now we are moving into the creek system. There's a lot of beautiful flowers on this little creek here. There are more pitcher plants in one place that I've ever seen. There's something else that looks as though it's kind of fuzzy. I don't know what that is. I'll have to try to identify it. Maybe I'll let you know this trip. Or maybe I'll just put it on the bottom of the screen if I have to wait until I get home to figure it out. There was a purple flower that I saw that might be a leftover from a May blossom. That'll be hard to identify, but I'll take a look at it. It's nice. And as I predicted, there are more and more clouds, and the sun is going behind the clouds, which is creating just perfect paddling conditions. We are now on Chippewa Lake. Another one of these lakes with a campsite. So this is a lake you could have all to yourself. This would be a good one to camp on, especially with this creek here. Good possibilities of wildlife viewing with this long creek that you could just paddle up and down, paddle late in the evening, and paddle early in the morning before anybody else gets here, before anybody else has an opportunity to scare away whatever wildlife might be here. There have already been several parties through, so I'm not hopeful that I'll see any wildlife, substantial wildlife, on this route, but it looks as though this is Papoose Creek, and I'm continuing on this creek past Chippewa into Papoose Lake, and then I continue on the creek for a little while longer, and then there's a 140 rod, a pretty substantial, about half-mile portage that then takes me into Crooked Lake, which will be the lake that I'll be camping on tonight. Just couldn't be more grateful right now. Looks like there is a substantial beaver dam here. It's probably just going to be a pullover. On this last section of Papoose Creek, it's widened up quite a bit. Feels a little bit more like a river. Well, it would seem that Papoose Creek is coming to an end. There is, looks like a big beaver dam that's been here for quite a long time that's overgrown with cattails. This must be the portage. The portage must be somewhere. I might have to look at my map, but I think it's on the right side. Yeah, it looks like it's on the right side. I'm sorry I wasn't able to show much of that last portage. It was buggy. The battery died on my GoPro, and I did not want to redo the battery there at that portage trail. And then by the time I got to the end of the portage, the mosquitoes were so thick in combination with the flies that I just had to get out of there as soon as I could. But we are on Crooked Lake, and it is a perfect day to be on Crooked Lake. So I stopped here on this beautiful little island of red pines with mossy growth underneath. It's in the shade, and it was a comfortable place to kind of get all the cameras back in order where they needed to be in preparation for what should be about an hour and a half to maybe 2-hour paddle here on Crooked Lake. And we'll see if I continue to see these swans. I saw the swans this morning from the campsite just before I left, and then I saw them again on Gun Lake, and now I just saw them on Crooked Lake. I don't know if they're the same swans. We'll see. We'll see if I continue to see swans. I just don't know. What I know is that swans were introduced here maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and they have really taken off. So now they've become a common feature of trips. All right, I am off. In case there was any doubt that we are in fact on a river, we just went up a swift. So this is Crooked Lake / Basswood River, and we just got past Thursday Bay, which means that we are now going to take a dramatic turn to the south. And it's time to start looking for a campsite, which is pretty good timing. It's 1:54. I believe we found home for the evening. Maybe not. Oh, looks like somebody's already got it. Okay. That's disappointing. Now I have a dilemma. What is my plan? There is a campsite here that is marginal. I could take that. Or I can continue. And I have 1, 6, 7 sites available within about 2.5 miles. Well, it is probably not the campsite that gets 5 stars. It probably picks up 2 or 3 stars. Doesn't have a lot of spots for tents, but it has 1. It does have a pretty good rock out here for getting into the breeze, if there's a need for some breeze. And it's got a good view. I've been here for about 15 minutes or so, 10 minutes, and have not encountered many mosquitoes or black flies. It's pretty high up, and so that's probably a good sign. Mosquitoes are always going to come at night, of course. Well, I'm just going to be optimistic about it. I mean, it is kind of closed off in here, but otherwise I think it's a pretty good campsite. I think it's going to be good enough. There isn't a great spot for a tarp, but I'll figure something out and I'll make it work. At least there's a good tent spot, and there's a place to get breeze, and there's plenty of shade. So it's got 3 important things, and it doesn't have very many bugs. looking at the weather report on the Zoleo, it's changed again. It changes a lot. It seems to be reasonably accurate for about 24 hours. But it shows that the weather should be similar tomorrow to what it is today. Maybe a little bit windier, and it'll be coming out of the south, so it'll be a headwind for me. And then for the next 2 days, it's showing 70% chance of rain, which could have implications for my route. But for right now, let's go ahead and let's look at where I've been today and where I'm planning to go tomorrow. Today's adventure began on Gull Lake, where I stayed at one of the best campsites in the Boundary Waters right here. It is the furthest east campsite on Gull Lake. From there, I went down the Beaver Dam portage. There was a beaver dam to begin this portage. Over here to beautiful Gun Lake. Paddled up Gun Lake to the north by northeast to this 320 something odd rod portage. Went from there to Wagosh Lake. And then from Wagosh Lake, I continued on across this 43 rod portage over here to Niki Lake. This portage was extreme up and extreme down. From Niki Lake, I then got on the Papoose Creek, or what would eventually become the Papoose Creek. Made it here to Chippewa Lake, which is a really good size and beautiful lake. Continued down the Papoose Creek to Papoose Lake, and then on the Papoose Creek here to this long, more than 100 rod portage, finally into Friday Bay, arriving at Crooked Lake. I paddled up Friday Bay, and then right here below the Canadian border, I continued over to Thursday Bay, paddled across Thursday Bay, up a little bit of current right here, continued on to Crooked Lake, saw that this first campsite was occupied, came into this deep bay here, looked at this second campsite right there, hoping that I would be able to get that campsite, but indeed it was occupied. Came back here to the campsite where I'm currently at, which initially looked pretty unattractive, but I have since really warmed to. Tomorrow is going to be another nice day for traveling. I will leave this campsite, come up here, follow the Canada-US border along Crooked Lake, coming down into Wednesday Bay. At Wednesday Bay, I will go here, which is the site where I'll see Table Rock. Then I will continue down Crooked Lake, going south until I get to the pictographs here. I'll take a look at those pictographs and talk a little bit about what I see there. From there, I will go to Lower Basswood Falls. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And this is when things become a little bit fuzzy for me. I know that tomorrow will be a nice day for traveling, but the next couple of days may not be so nice, so I don't know how far I want to go. I may decide to push it and go past Lower Basswood Falls, and then connect here to the Horse River and start going south. It has certainly turned into a beautiful day for paddling. Despite the current and the headwind slightly impeding my progress, I couldn't be more thankful for these high uniform clouds protecting me from the hot sun. I just passed an international marker that marks the boundary between the United States and Canada. This is a very historic route. That boundary that exists between Canada and the United States in this area, that is northern Minnesota and Ontario, was defined by the old voyageur trade route. The next culturally important place that we'll see is Table Rock. Now, I don't know a lot about the history of Table Rock, but I can tell you what the guidebooks say. And the guidebooks don't provide a lot of detail, but what they say is that it was a meeting place that native peoples, that is indigenous peoples, would meet with Europeans there, and they would trade furs for European manufactured goods. It's also a place that's mentioned in the journals of early explorers like Radisson and Grossier, who were the first Europeans to come through this area. And I believe that it was also a place where the Anishinaabe and the Sioux met for a peace treaty. It's like a museum, you know, it's a part of so many people's history. The indigenous people, the fur traders, the early explorers. Speaking of which, I think our next stop on this historic route is the pictographs. Well, I just passed the pictographs. Even if there were no pictographs, it is a spectacular cliff. So spectacular, as a matter of fact, that it was painted in a really famous painting called Return of the Voyageurs. The artist was Francis Lee Jacques. but just the rock face itself is spectacular. It's worthy of capturing, as demonstrated by Francis Lee Jacques' painting. But in terms of these pictographs, I'm not that well schooled on what they mean. I did see the crane, which is cool because the crane / loon is one of the original Anishinaabe clans, and as a totem, what it represents is those people in the clans that are destined or well suited to be chiefs or great rhetoricians. You know, they're really great at elocution, good at speech making, good at storytelling, and they can kind of marshal an audience and lead the people. So it was kind of cool to see that for sure. And then I saw the big canoe with all the passengers and the flags on the back of it, and saw more crosses. It was great. It was a great experience. I'm so glad that I've seen those pictographs. Oh, there's my buddies. The swans are back. They, I don't know if they're the same swans that have been following me around or not, but I just keep seeing them. Anyway, wow. Just great. This has been such a great trip. I'm so glad to have seen those. And this is such a beautiful place. I have to bring my wife back here because there's so much exposed rock and beautiful cliffs, and that cliff face is amazing. It's just outstanding. Everything about this is outstanding. Such a good trip. Anyway, next up is going to be a spectacular set of waterfalls, that is Lower Basswood Falls. I'm getting close to Lower Basswood Falls. It is a thunderous roar. I am committed now. I'm headed south on the Horse River. Looks as though there's 3, maybe 4 portages for sure. They're not long, so I should be able to knock them out pretty quickly. I think 70 rod is the longest, and that's the first. I'm coming upon that now, and I ran into some guys at Basswood who came in from Muldrow who said that they had a lot of people coming in today, which concerns me. Right now I just want to get a campsite on Horse or Fourtown so I can be set up to get on the Moose Camp River tomorrow. Apparently the weather that they got before they came in is that today is supposed to be the nicest day, with maybe a little chance of rain around 5. Tomorrow, chance of rain in the morning, and then the day after, little chance of rain in the morning, maybe in the evening, and then Tuesday, which is the day after that, it's supposed to be 70% chance and heavy thunderstorms. So that's the situation. All right, here we go. Well, that does it for the first portage. That was the 70 rod, that's the long one. Quite a muddy portage. Ran into a family and from Indiana that said just left horse and ambiguous as to whether or not they think there's a open campsite on horse. Nice people. Second group I've run into from Indiana. Go Hoosiers. Coming up on portage number 2 on the Horse River, ran into another group. They said there's at least one open campsite on horse. They came from the south, so that means one campsite to the south. All right, that's portage number 2 of 3 marked portages, and we'll see if there's another one. There's a spot on my Mackenzie map that says rapids, but doesn't indicate that there's a portage, so we'll see. I should have asked one of these groups that I've already passed, but you know, it's not going to change what is at this point. I'm committed. Well, I'm confronted with a riffle. It doesn't look like it's the beginning of a big portage. Looks like some people have portaged it, but it doesn't seem that big. I think I can just lift over this. Supposedly, this is the last portage on the Horse River. The portages on this river are tricky. Oftentimes there are little riffles that have to be negotiated on top of the portage. I've had a couple so far. As you can tell, I'm a little winded because this river is working me hard as I am desperately trying to get to horse at a reasonable time so that I can get a campsite tonight. As much as I am frustrated by this river now, I would be a lot more frustrated if I had to go back down it in order to find a campsite on Basswood. Got another riffle. This is a lot of work. And on top of everything, I'm worried about my portage yoke. I think I might have stripped out one of the bolts. It's gonna be tough. I've got some big portages, as you know. I'm looking forward to getting to camp so I can stop and I can assess that situation and, if necessary, do a field repair or adjust. And now I can see Horse Lake in front of me. There still might be a swift I've got to navigate, but my Mackenzie map is way off. It showed 3 portages, but then I looked at my Voyageur map, and my Voyageur map shows many more. Well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that it's not nearly as windy on Horse Lake as I thought it was going to be. The bad news is that there doesn't appear to be an open campsite. This show continues to be on the road. And I have really great news. Portage yoke is going to continue to work. I'm pretty sure I can make it work for the rest of this trip. I've decided to move on to Fourtown Lake, where there are many more sites. This area between Horse and Fourtown is pretty low, pretty swampy, and boy, just a lot of mosquitoes. Just a ton of mosquitoes. Well, this Mackenzie map is kind of a bummer because it It is missing a lot of portages. There are a lot of unmarked portages on this map. But it does look as though there are some campsites on Fourtown. I just ran into a couple that was fishing here, and they report that there are several campsites available, including some pretty nice ones. So I just could not be happier to hear that news. Now, I just have to bring it to fruition by getting to Fourtown and claiming one of those campsites. It is now 3:47, pretty late to be camping in the Boundary Waters. Fourtown at last. Fourtown at last. I should know better. I should have known that when I decided to push it today, that there was going to be a lot of drama. That's just how this goes. I really need to learn how to slow down on these trips. There's no reason why I have to go so fast and cover so many miles in a day. Yep. And there are a lot of open campsites here. Here's one. There's one down there. At the end of the day, I have been richly rewarded with a glorious campsite. Look at this view. And I've got a beautiful rock here that exposes me to any breeze that's coming from pretty much any direction to keep bugs away. I have a commanding view with great breeze, which is going to protect me from the bugs. The rest of the campsite's pretty nice too. Plenty of flat ground. It's got plenty of trees for hanging tarps. It is 4:02. Hopefully I will be settled in by 5. .503, and I am settled into this campsite. Cheese and pepperoni on tortillas. Cold supper. Still mighty tasty. This campsite is quite buggy. Every time I go back there, I am just mobbed by mosquitoes. But out here, where there's a breeze, no mosquitoes, no bugs of any kind. So this is very relaxing. In all of that paddling, I started at 8 a.m. and I didn't stop until 4. And I literally was going, I guess for 8 hours. So it was like a full work day, but it was pretty heavy labor. And now I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and do almost nothing. Very emotional day. Saw some great things. Table Rock, pictographs, Basswood Falls. Was able to travel the Horse River, do a really rugged trip. Yes, there were a lot of unmarked portages on my Mackenzie map, but also a lot of opportunities to practice wilderness skills like lining my canoe, which was an unexpected surprise. And at the time, unpleasant, but in retrospect, I'm glad I had an opportunity to do it. Found this campsite, which is pretty good. Not as great as I thought it was when I first found it. I love this breezy point because it saves me from any mosquitoes. There aren't as many good tent pads as I originally thought, but I did find one that I think is going to work out well. That's going to allow me to have a good night's sleep. Rain is predicted for the overnight. I don't know how long it's going to last or when it's going to start. If it's raining in the morning, I'll probably sleep in. If it's not raining, I'll get an early start and either do the Moose Camp River or a chain of lakes that'll take me to Gun or Gull, where I will spend my 4th night. And that'll probably be my last night, because the 5th day the weather is rainy but no thunderstorms. But what would be the 6th day is high probability of severe thunderstorms. And I do not want to deal with that when I'm trying to paddle out. And I would not have enough provisions to lay over for another day. I would have to stretch whatever I have available for food to be able to do that. And so I'm reluctant to take that risk on that last day. So it might just be a 4-night trip here. But 4 nights and 5 days is more than enough to get a taste of this beautiful wilderness, especially in June. It's been a good trip, and it's going to be a good night. I'll see you tomorrow morning. It has been threatening rain all morning, but my Zoleo forecast says that the only real chance of rain today is 10 a.m. That hasn't stopped it from misting all morning, which has compelled me to have my jacket readily available should it happen to open up and start raining. The route for today is a little bit easier than I had planned. Looking at the Moose Camp River, I think that would be a good adventure. But after yesterday, I'm really not looking for another adventure. Today I would like to spend a little bit of time to do some camping. So I'm taking the more predictable route of, rather than going up the Moose Camp River to get back to the Gun Gull area where I plan on camping tonight, I'm gonna take Boot and Fairy Lake and the few portages that are there. I think that maybe it's 3 portages before I can get to Gun Lake. And Moose Camp River is not normally either maintained or even recommended to paddle, which could mean a lot of things. It could mean a lot of beaver dams to pull up over. In fact, that's almost certain. Even in high water, there's going to be beaver dams to pull up over. It means that there may be bush portages, there may be rapids that have to be lined up or bush portaged around. And frankly, I hate to be this kind of a guy, but I'm just not into that today. I had enough of that yesterday, so today is going to be a more chill day. I'm headed to the portage now to Boot Lake. I am now approaching what appears to be the portage between Fourtown Lake and Boot Lake. just left Boot Lake, and I kind of moved through Boot Lake pretty quickly, but it is quite a nice lake. Good exposed rock face there, a lot of relief on the shore, and just right next to the Portage Trail on the way into Fairy Lake, there's a beautiful big beaver dam. So it has a wild feel about it. It's a nice lake. Fairy Lake is pretty nice though too. Even though it's a small lake, it's a really nice lake. I cannot complain. It's a perfect day for paddling and a perfect day for mosquitoes. Apparently we both like it. And that's going to be the case because it's probably in the upper 60s, lower 70s, or approaching lower 70s. It's really humid, threatening rain and kind of misting a little bit. Mosquitoes love that too. And although we are promised southerly winds of approximately 9 miles an hour today, those winds have not arrived yet. And so mosquitoes are always bad on the portages, but now they're following us out on the lakes because there isn't a breeze to blow them away right away, which means I'm keeping my head net on longer than I would like. But I'm taking it off here on Fairy Lake because I want to see this lake in its full glory. It's nice. We are now on Gun Lake, and I can see that one campsite is already taken. This may be our destination lake for the day. We'll see. I want to scope out the campsites. It's only 10:30, so I have a lot of time. There might be some people who are at campsites who haven't even left yet, but who plan on leaving today. So we'll see if there's something here. I might poke my nose over into Gull Lake to see if that campsite I got on the first night is open, because I just want to spend some time at camp relaxing, and that means that I must have exposure to prevailing breeze, which I'm almost certain is coming out of the south, and that is my primary consideration. Since I'll be there for a long time, I want a place where I can sit, be out of the bugs, and just relax, do some reading. I took a chance. I came over to Gull Lake to see if that campsite I got the first night is still open, because it would have been perfect. It would have had a long point exposure to the south, and so it would have had breeze along most of the campsite. And guess what? It's available! Yeah! Woo! Yes! 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 So I've got this great tarp spot that I'll use again. And I mean, everything about this campsite was great the first night. It's even better today because the bugs are thicker today than they were when I came in. With this humid conditions, with these comfortable temps for the bugs, the only thing that's going to save anybody is a good breeze. And this one has access to the prevailing breeze of the day, which is going to be coming to the south, right here on this point. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and relax out here on this point, have a snack, drink some Gatorade, and then set up a tent and a tarp at what might be the best campsite in the entire BWCA, but especially great today. This is still a great campsite. I'm staying here absolutely 100%, but there is a snapping turtle here that is laying eggs in the duff right near the fire pit. So I'm just going to have to be very mindful of that. Hopefully she'll be done soon, and I won't have to worry too much about that. But I think I'll take some time and set up the tarp and just kind of stay out of her way. after a great afternoon on this campsite with a good breeze, almost no bugs, a turtle that was laying its eggs, a dragonfly that was hatching from its shell, it was transitioning into its full form. But it is now 6 o'clock, and in an unpredicted weather event that is not predicted by my Zoleo device and the weather app component of it, it is starting to rain. It's not a heavy rain, it's more like kind of the rain that we got this morning. It's almost like a misting rather than a full-on rain, but it has put me underneath the tarp for the time being. 2 parties have passed me, one going west, one going east. Otherwise, nobody else is camped at this lake, which means that I have it to myself. It has been a wonderful trip, just an incredible trip so far. It's amazing how much you can pack in to just 4 nights and 5 days paddling through canoe country. Yesterday was epic. I paddled 17 miles. Today was chill. I only paddled about 5 or 6 miles. Tomorrow will be another relatively chill day with the exception of the big portages. I'm only moving about 7 miles. But tonight, I hope to get as good of a night's sleep as I got last night. It is 8:35. A little bit late, but I ended up sleeping in until 6 because I was woke up several times last night by, I don't know, animals scurrying around in the campsite. I got out of my tent at one point to look around because something kept running into my canoe with that drumming sound, and I heard kind of like, I don't know, scuttering, skittering around the campsite. I didn't know what to think of it, so I checked it out, but it woke me up, kept me awake for a while. On top of that, I didn't go to sleep right away. So it was an okay night of sleep. I ended up getting like 6 to 7 hours, but looks as though the Zoleo forecast shows pretty consistent chances of rain throughout the morning, and certainly the skies do look very threatening. Here I am approaching the portage. The first portage, it's a little over a mile. Not too bad of a portage. I think it's nice about that one is that there really are no substantial obstacles. I think I knocked it out in about 20 to 30 minutes. It helps to do the single carry. That saves a lot of time on portages, but it does require me to forego many things, especially on the food side. My food is very simple in order to keep my outfit pretty light. But for me, that is a welcome trade, especially when you consider how much faster I'm able to move and how much easier it is to portage. I'm on Home Lake now. And Home Lake is a relatively small lake, beautiful lake, accessed by canoe or the Angleworm Trail. I would like to return here sometime in the fall. I think would be a great time to come to this area and do the backpacking trip on the Angleworm Trail and stay at a place like Home Lake and Angleworm Lake. Be a great like 2-night, 3-day trip. Just taking your time, enjoying the fall colors. On that kind of a trip, you might want to bring some yummy food. But you're not carrying a canoe and a paddle and all that stuff. You're just carrying a backpack and a tent, and I'd likely go with my wife and we could share the burden of carrying gear, which would be nice. Bring out some eggs and some hash browns, make some pancakes, have some nice big breakfasts, maybe a steak for supper on the first night. Oh, the possibilities. Anyway, that's future. Present self is paddling across Home Lake. I will let you know when I get to the portage leading into Angleworm Lake. Coming up to the portage now. This is the portage from home into Angleworm Lake. The mosquitoes are thick. So I am headed out now. This is day 5 of my 4-night, 5-day expedition. There's been a lot of cool stuff that's happened. But one thing I really haven't talked about is all the flowers that we've seen on this trip. Probably, you know, the one that always takes the cake for this area is the pink lady slipper. Pink lady slippers are members of the orchid family, and they are very delicate flowers and fragile. First of all, it takes a lot for them to be able to germinate at all. There is a less than 0.001 chance of any particular pink lady slipper seed resulting in a germinating plant. And then it takes 3 years for it to successfully germinate. The reason it takes so long and the reason it's so chancy for pink lady slippers to germinate is because their seeds don't carry any nutrients. Like most seeds, there's a nutrient package that helps develop the fledgling plant and gives it energy to germinate, but pink lady slippers don't have that. In fact, what they rely on is they rely on a fungus that will provide those nutrients, and in exchange the fungus ends up living in the root system of the pink lady slipper. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So for a pink lady slipper to germinate at all, it has to find a particular fungus, they have to connect, and then they have to enter into a symbiotic relationship. So it's very difficult for a pink lady slipper to germinate at all, which is one of the reasons why it's so special to find one. The other thing that makes them so incredibly cool is that they can live for 100 years. They can bloom for a century. And so the pink lady slippers that you come across, those pink lady slippers, they could predate World War II. They could have been blooming during the Depression. That's amazing. But that really does impact the reason why you are always discouraged from picking really any flowers in the Boundary Waters or in any kind of wilderness preserve, but particularly pink lady slippers, regardless of where you find them. Of course, prickly wild rose is in full bloom. Those are great, beautiful, they're all over the place. They're a beautiful 5-petaled flower, members of the rose family in general, which is really an important family. A lot of members of the rose family produce fruits that we commonly eat. You know, things like apples, for example, are members of the rose family, which is interesting. You know, you don't think about apple trees and roses as being related, but they're both members of the same family. And the thing that's cool about prickly wild roses in the boreal forest is that they produce hips, which contain their seeds. And after the first frost in the fall, those hips become quite tasty. They're not terribly sweet, but they have a really good flavor about them. And moreover, the thing that's really cool about rose hips, or another thing that's really cool about them, is that they are packed with vitamins. 3 tiny little rose hips contain as much vitamin C as an entire orange. And there's also other vitamins in there like B and K as well, and some other vitamins. And so, you know, eating rose hips is almost like having a multivitamin. And rose hips have been used as a kind of medicine for a very long time, usually made into a syrup or something, or a jam, something like that, that can be used to fortify one's immune system against like an oncoming cold, for example. So prickly wild rose, plenty of that. A lot of clintonia. Clintonia is an interesting flower. It's got those long leaves, parallel veined, and they come right out of the base of the plant. And then they consist of usually about 3-ish yellowish flowers that, you know, look like lilies. They are members of the lily family. Those flowers eventually turn into dark purple berries that are not edible. In fact, they're mildly poisonous to humans. But the irony is that when clintonia, before it flowers, when it's just the leaves, early in the springtime, those leaves taste like cucumbers and can be used to make a pretty yummy salad. But by the time that there are flowers on the clintonia, which is the easy way to identify them, that's the point at which the leaves are no longer really edible. They don't taste good anymore. We also saw some dogwood. Dogwood is just starting to bloom. Dogwood, or it's also called daggerwood. And I'll talk about that throughout the season. It's particularly beautiful because of the red, straight stems of dogwood. It's really beautiful in like the fall and the winter because those red stems just pop out against the otherwise drab background. But they also produce beautiful flowers as well as beautiful berries, not edible to humans. Saw some pale corydalis. I don't know anything about it other than how to identify it, but it's a gorgeous pink and yellow flower that generally thrives on rocky outcroppings. You see that a lot. And that blooms for quite a long time, I think throughout June at least. I've seen it pretty late. What else did we see? A bunchberry, so much bunchberry. Bunchberry is just a beautiful little flower that carpets the forest floor, generally in the understory. It's really easy to identify because of those 4 petals, which are actually not petals, they're called bracts, and which are just a kind of leaf, but they're white, and that's the showiest element of bunchberry. Actually, the flowers are inside. They're in the center of those 4 petals, or bracts. And there's a lot of flowers on them that turn into berries, thus the name bunchberries. Also some false lily of the valley, or what's called the Canadian mayflower. Quite a lot of those, zigzagging stems, heart-shaped leaves, clusters of flowers, and there's a lot of false lily of the valley up here, especially this time of year. It's not fully in bloom, but you can see, and it also will carpet the forest floor. Both false lily of the valley and bunchberry are rhizomatic, which means that they spread through their root system, and so when you find them, you almost always find them in big colonies that are spreading out. And it's really all just one plant. I just got a text message. I'm moving out of the wilderness and moving into cell phone range, and so I got a text message. Such a beautiful lake. Angleworm Lake. Just passing the cliffs of Angleworm now. Oh, what else did we see for flowers? Wild sarsaparilla is not quite in bloom yet. What else did we see? Oh, pitcher plants. Pitcher plants are cool. I saw some great stands of pitcher plants. They are carnivorous. So those big cups at the base of those pitcher plants, those big cups contain a digestive fluid, and so insects that fly in there, they get stuck in the digestive fluid and then they actually get digested by the plant itself, which is interesting. So that's pitcher plants. We saw a lot of pitcher plants. What else did we see? I think that's about it for flowers that we've seen so far on this trip, which is quite a lot of flowers. It's a nice time to be out here to see all those flowers. I don't think there's a single person on Angleworm Lake. I haven't seen one camper on Angleworm Lake because I'm just passing the best campsite here and my phone just went off again and nobody has camped there. Anyway, I'm coming up on the portage now, probably in another 1/5 of a mile, and I'll let you know when I get there. That portage seems to get longer every time I do it. Whew! These 4 nights and 5 days have been a grand adventure, filled with some big portages, some long distances, some bewitchingly beautiful streams and rivers, some incredible historical sites, some great campsites, some wildlife, beautiful wildflowers, a lot of mosquitoes, just about everything you could expect from a June trip. But alas, all good things must come to an end, as does this trip come to an end now. I'll be headed home, looking forward to embracing my wife and having a kitty sit on my lap. Keep the ones you love close, and thanks for watching.